2 days ago, my wife Jessica dropped me off at a restaurant, kissed me on the cheek, and whispered, "I'll be right back." She never came back. At first, I thought maybe she got stuck in traffic or had to take a call. But an hour later, I was pacing outside the restaurant, dialing her number over and over, straight to voicemail. My family was inside, celebrating my dad's birthday, and I was out there in the freezing cold, looking like a complete idiot, waiting for a woman who had seemingly vanished. And then my phone buzzed. A call from Jess. Finally, I answered it so fast I nearly dropped the phone. "Jess? Where are you?" Her voice was calm. Too calm. "Hey, you know I love you, right?" My blood ran cold. That was not an answer to my question. That was something people say before they rip your life apart. "Jessica, what the hell is going on?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. She paused. I could hear the faint sound of music in the background, like she was somewhere loud, somewhere fun. "I just needed to get away for a bit," she said, as if that was supposed to make any sense. I clenched my jaw. "From what? From me? From this?" No, it's not like that," she said quickly, but there was a nervous edge to her voice now. "I'll explain everything later, I promise. Just go back inside. Okay? Be with your family." "Are you kidding me?" I snapped. "You left me standing here like a fool, and you want me to pretend everything's fine?" Another pause. "Please just trust me," she whispered, and then click, she hung up. That was it. No explanation, no apology, just a vague promise to talk later. I stood there, staring at my phone like it had betrayed me. The rational part of me wanted to believe she'd had some sort of emergency. Maybe a friend needed her. Maybe she got bad news. But deep down, I knew it wasn't that simple. Something was wrong. When I got back inside, my mom gave me a concerned look. "Where's Jessica?" "She had to step out," I said, forcing a smile that didn't reach my eyes. For the rest of the night, I played the part. I laughed at my dad's jokes, toasted his birthday, and acted like nothing was bothering me. But my mind was spinning. Jess wasn't answering my texts. My calls went straight to voicemail. By the time I got home, it was past midnight. Her car wasn't in the driveway. Her coat wasn't on the hook by the door. I sat on the couch, staring at the wall, waiting. 1 hour. 2 hours. Nothing. At 3 a.m., the front door finally creaked open. Jess walked in, looking like she'd just come back from a night out. Her makeup was smudged, her hair messy, and her eyes wouldn't meet mine. "Where the hell were you?" I asked, standing up. She sighed, kicking off her heels like it was just another Tuesday. "I told you, I needed some space." "Space from what?" I was trying to keep my voice calm, but my hands were shaking. "Jess, you left me at a restaurant. You disappeared for hours. Do you have any idea how that looked?" "I didn't mean for it to go that long," she said, brushing past me like I wasn't even there. "I just needed time to clear my head." I grabbed her arm gently, but firmly. "Clear your head from what? Talk to me." And that's when I noticed it. Her perfume was different. Not the one she usually wore. This one was heavier, muskier. The kind of scent that lingered after you'd been too close to someone else. I let go of her arm, taking a step back. "Who were you with?" Her eyes widened for a split second, but then she laughed. A short, bitter laugh. "Seriously? You think I'm cheating on you?" "You tell me," I said quietly, "because nothing about this makes sense." She crossed her arms, her expression hardening. "You're being paranoid." "Am I?" I shot back. "You vanish for hours, come back smelling like someone else, and you expect me to just trust you?" She rolled her eyes. "God, you're exhausting sometimes, you know that?" I stared at her, my heart pounding. "I'm exhausting?" "Yes," she snapped. "You never stop questioning everything. I can't even breathe without you hovering." My mind was racing. This wasn't just about tonight. This was something deeper, something she'd been holding back for a while. But before I could say anything else, she turned and walked upstairs, leaving me standing in the living room, speechless. And as I stood there, one thought kept running through my mind, over and over. She wasn't sorry that I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the couch, my mind spiraling, replaying every detail from the past few months. The unexplained absences, the sudden work trips, the way her phone was always face down on the table, little things I'd brushed off as quirks, or maybe even my own insecurities, suddenly clicked into place like pieces of a puzzle I didn't want to solve. At 6 a.m., I heard her footsteps upstairs, the sound of the shower running, the casual hum of a woman who hadn't just shattered her husband's trust. I marched up the stairs and stood outside the bathroom door, staring at it like it might unlock all the answers. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst out of my chest. When she finally emerged, wrapped in a towel, her wet hair dripping down her back, she looked at me with mild annoyance, like I was the one being unreasonable. "Can we talk now?" I asked, my voice low but steady. She sighed dramatically, tightening the towel around her. "I'm not in the mood for another interrogation." "It's not an interrogation, Jess. It's a simple question. Who were you with last night?" Her lips curled into a smirk. Not the kind of smirk you want to see on your wife's face. It wasn't playful. It wasn't loving. It was cold, calculated. "Why does it matter?" she said. My stomach twisted. "Why does it matter? That's not what an innocent person says." "It matters because you're my wife," I said through gritted teeth. "It matters because I've been losing my mind trying to figure out what's going on with you, and you don't seem to care." She tilted her head, studying me like I was some sort of science experiment. "Maybe that's your problem," she said slowly. "You care too much." I felt like I'd been slapped. "Excuse me?" She shrugged, walking past me into the bedroom. She pulled open her closet. Grabbing a casual outfit like this was just another day. Like our marriage wasn't hanging by a thread. "You smother me, Dylan," she said, pulling on a pair of jeans. "You're always there, always asking questions, always waiting for me. It's exhausting." I clenched my fists, trying to keep my composure. "So this is my fault?" She turned to me, arms crossed. "You said it, not me." The audacity of her words hit me like a punch to the gut. This wasn't guilt talking. This wasn't a woman who had made a mistake and regretted it. This was someone who was done pretending. "I've never stopped you from doing anything," I said, my voice shaking with anger. "All I've ever done is love you, support you, and now you're standing here blaming me." Jessica rolled her eyes, grabbing her phone from the nightstand. "I'm not blaming you, Dylan. I'm just saying, maybe you should take a step back and ask yourself why you're so damn obsessed with controlling me." "Controlling you?" I nearly laughed at the absurdity. "You've been disappearing for hours, lying to my face, and somehow I'm the controlling one?" She glanced at her phone, scrolling through it casually, as if this conversation bored her. And then it hit me. The phone. Her lifeline. Her constant companion these past few months. "Give me your phone," I said, stepping closer. Jessica's head snapped up. For the first time, I saw real panic flash across her face. "No. Give me the damn phone, Jess." "No," she repeated, clutching it to her chest like it was a lifeline. "You don't have the right." "I don't have the right? I'm your husband. And that doesn't give you the right to snoop through my private things." Private things? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my voice. "Jessica, if there's nothing to hide, then give me the phone. Prove me wrong." She shook her head, taking a step back. "I'm not doing this with you." I lunged forward, grabbing her wrist. Not hard, but firm enough to make a point. "Who is he?" Her eyes widened. "Dylan, stop." "Who is he?" She yanked her hand free, her face twisted in anger. "You want to know the truth?" she snapped. "Fine. Yes, there's someone else." My entire world tilted on its axis. I had suspected it, sure, but hearing her say it out loud was like being hit by a freight train. I stumbled back, my mind reeling. "How long?" I whispered. Jessica crossed her arms, her expression indifferent. "Does it matter?" "Yes, it matters," I shouted. "It matters because I thought we were building a life together. I thought you loved me." Her face softened for a moment, and for a split second, I saw a flicker of the woman I married. But it was gone just as quickly. "I did love you," she said quietly. "But people change." I stared at her, completely numb. "So that's it? 7 years, gone? Just like that?" Jessica sighed. Like this was all such an inconvenience to her. "I don't know what you want me to say, Dylan. I'm sorry if you're hurt, but I need more than this. More than you. Couldn't breathe. The air felt thick, suffocating. More than me, I echoed. So what now? You walk away and leave me to pick up the pieces. She shrugged. I guess that's up to you. And with that, she grabbed her bag, slung it over her shoulder, and walked out the door. I stood there, staring after her, my hands shaking with rage and heartbreak. I wasn't just losing my wife. I was losing the version of her I thought I knew. The version of us that I thought was real. And the worst part? I had a feeling this was only the beginning. She left. Just like that, Jessica walked out, leaving me standing in the bedroom, drowning in questions that had no answers. I paced back and forth, my mind racing through every conversation we'd had, every moment that now seemed fake. But one question burned hotter than the rest. Who the hell is he? The thought of her with someone else made my chest tighten. It wasn't just the betrayal, it was the humiliation. The fact that she had looked me in the eyes, kissed me goodbye, and then run off to him. But here's the thing. I'm not the type to sit back and wait for answers to fall into my lap. If Jessica wasn't going to tell me the truth, I'd find it myself. So I started with her phone records. I called our phone provider and got access to her call logs. It didn't take long to notice a pattern. One number showed up repeatedly. Calls at odd hours. Long conversations during her work trips. I stared at that number for a long time before dialing it. My heart was pounding, my palms sweaty. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. Then, a man's voice answered. Hello. I didn't say anything at first. I just listened. His voice was calm, confident. The kind of voice that didn't belong to someone hiding in the shadows. Who is this? He asked again, a bit more impatient this time. I finally spoke. I think you know who this is. There was a pause. Dylan. Hearing my name in his mouth made my blood boil. So you know who I am, I said, my voice cold. That saves me some time. I think there's been a misunderstanding, he said, but I could hear the nerves creeping into his tone. No misunderstanding. I shot back. You've been seeing my wife. Another pause. Longer this time. I'm sorry, he finally said. I didn't know she was married. I laughed bitterly. Oh, come on. You expect me to believe that? I swear, man, he said quickly. She told me she was separated. That you two weren't together anymore. Separated. That word hit me like a slap to the face. We were having dinner with my family 2 nights ago, I said through gritted teeth. Does that sound like we're separated to you? The man on the other end was silent for a moment. Look, I don't want any trouble, he finally said. I'm done with her. I didn't sign up for this. Done with her? I repeated, feeling the anger bubble up again. What does that mean? She showed up at my place last night, he said, his voice quieter now. I told her it was over. I don't do married women. I'm sorry, man. I really didn't know. I hung up without saying another word. My hands were shaking, my mind racing. She went to his place last night, right after she left me standing outside the restaurant. But that wasn't the part that bothered me the most. No, what haunted me was the way he spoke about her. Like she was some passing fling. Like she meant nothing to him. And yet, she was willing to burn our entire marriage to the ground for this? When Jessica finally came home that evening, I was waiting for her in the living room. She walked in, saw me sitting there, and froze. Dylan, she started, but I held up a hand. Sit down, I said. She hesitated for a moment, then sat on the couch, her posture defensive. I talked to him, I said, watching her closely. Her eyes flickered with something. Surprise? Fear? It was hard to tell. Who? She asked, feigning confusion. I leaned forward. Don't play dumb, Jess. I talked to the guy you've been sneaking around with. She bit her lip, her hands fidgeting in her lap. What did he say? He said you told him we were separated. I said, my voice cold. Is that true? Is that what you've been telling people? Jessica looked down at her hands, avoiding my gaze. I didn't know how to explain it, she said quietly. Explain what? I snapped. That you're a liar? That you've been playing both sides? She finally looked up, her eyes filled with something resembling regret. I was unhappy, Dylan. I didn't know how to tell you. Unhappy? I repeated, shaking my head. So your solution was to run off with some random guy and pretend you weren't married? It wasn't like that, she said quickly. I never meant for it to go this far. But it did, I said. And now here we are. She opened her mouth to say something, but I cut her off. Save it. I'm done listening to your excuses. You want to be with someone else? Fine. But don't you dare sit here and pretend you're the victim. Jessica's face hardened. You think this is all my fault? I think you made your choices, I said. And now you have to live with them. For the first time, I saw a flash of anger in her eyes. You weren't exactly perfect either, Dylan, she said. I laughed bitterly. Oh, please, enlighten me. What did I do to deserve this? You stopped trying, she said. You got comfortable. You took me for granted. I stared at her, completely dumbfounded. I took you for granted? I repeated. I was the one fighting for this marriage while you were out screwing around. Jessica stood up, grabbing her bag. I'm not doing this with you, she said, heading for the door. But before she could leave, I said one last thing. Do you even feel guilty? She stopped, her hand on the doorknob. For a moment I thought she might say something, that she might apologize or show some shred of remorse. But instead, she turned to me with a cold, empty look in her eyes. No, she said. I don't. And then she walked out. Again I sat in that living room, staring at the door Jessica had just walked through. The silence in the house was deafening. No, I wasn't going to let her walk away this time. I grabbed my keys and followed her outside. She was halfway down the driveway, walking fast, her bag slung over her shoulder like she couldn't get away from me fast enough. Jessica, I shouted, my voice cutting through the quiet street. She stopped but didn't turn around. For a moment I thought she might just keep walking. But then she sighed and turned to face me, arms crossed, her face blank. What do you want, Dylan? Answers, I said, marching toward her. I want the truth. No more lies. No more excuses. I want to know why you're doing this, why you're throwing away everything we built. She rolled her eyes, like I was being dramatic. Dylan, it's over. What more do you want me to say? I stepped closer, my voice lowering. Who is he, Jess? The real him, not just some random guy you picked up. What's his name? Her lips pressed into a thin line. She didn't want to answer, but I wasn't letting this go. His name. She finally sighed, rubbing her temples like I was giving her a headache. Mark. Mark. I repeated, the name tasting bitter on my tongue. And how long has this been going on with Mark? Jessica shrugged. A few months. A few months? I repeated, shaking my head in disbelief. So, while I was planning our anniversary trip, while I was working my ass off to keep us afloat, you were sneaking around with Mark? Her eyes flickered with irritation. Don't act like you're some saint, Dylan. We haven't been happy for a long time. I laughed bitterly. No, you haven't been happy. I was perfectly fine until you decided to blow up our life. Jessica took a step forward, her voice sharp. Fine? You call this marriage fine? We barely talked anymore. You buried yourself in work and expected me to just sit at home and wait for you. I got tired of feeling invisible, Dylan. Invisible? I shot back. You weren't invisible. You were my wife. I was out there working to give us a life, to build something for us. Her expression softened for a split second, but then the coldness returned. Maybe that's the problem, she said quietly. You were building a life, but I wasn't part of it. I felt a pang of guilt for a moment, but it quickly turned into anger. So, instead of talking to me, you decided to screw around behind my back? Jessica shrugged again, that same maddening indifference on her face. I didn't plan for it to happen. Oh, don't give me that, I snapped. Affairs don't just happen. You made a choice, Jess. You chose to lie. You chose to cheat. She met my eyes, her gaze hard and unflinching. And you chose to ignore me for months. We stood there, staring each other down, both of us refusing to back down. Finally, I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. Where were you last night? Jessica blinked, caught off guard by the sudden shift. What? Last night? I repeated. After you dropped me off at the restaurant. Where did you go? She hesitated, and I knew I had her. You went to him, didn't you? Her silence was all the confirmation I needed. I stepped closer, my voice trembling with anger. You left me standing outside a restaurant in front of my entire family. You called me to say, "You know I love you, right?" And then you ran straight to him. Jessica opened her mouth to respond, but I didn't let her. And the worst part? I continued. He doesn't even care about you. He told me it's over. He told me you mean nothing to him. That hit her hard. Her eyes widened, and for the first time, I saw a crack in her composure. "What?" she whispered. I took another step forward, my voice relentless. "Yeah, I talked to Mark. He's done with you. So tell me, Jess, was it worth it? Was all of this worth throwing away everything we had for a guy who doesn't even want you anymore?" She stumbled back, like I'd physically struck her. Her mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. "You didn't think this through, did you?" I pressed. "You thought you'd keep me on the hook while you had your fun. But now, you're alone, Jess, and you have no one to blame but yourself." Tears welled in her eyes, but I didn't care. "Not anymore. I never wanted to hurt you," she said quietly. "Too late," I said. "You already did." For a moment, we just stood there, the weight of everything crashing down around us. Then Jessica wiped her eyes, squared her shoulders, and said something that chilled me to the bone. "You're right," she said. "Mark's done. But that doesn't mean I'm alone." "What the hell does that mean?" I asked, narrowing my eyes. Jessica smiled, a cold, bitter smile. "It means you've only scratched the surface, Dylan. You think this was just about one guy." My stomach twisted. "What are you saying?" She took a step closer, her voice low and venomous. "I've been done with this marriage for a long time. Mark was just one chapter. There were others. You want the truth? You're not the only one who's been played." I stood there, frozen, as her words sunk in. "You've been lying this whole time," Jessica shrugged. "Sometimes you have to break a few hearts to get what you want." And with that, she walked away. This time, I didn't follow her. Couldn't. Because suddenly, I realized I had no idea who the woman I married really was. I sat in the dark, my mind spinning, replaying her words over and over again. "You've only scratched the surface. Mark was just one chapter. There were others." She didn't even try to deny it. She just stood there, cold and smug, like she enjoyed watching me unravel. That wasn't the woman I married. That wasn't the woman I loved. That was a stranger. I poured myself a drink, my hands shaking as I tried to process what she'd said. Other men? Plural? How long had this been going on? Was my entire marriage a lie? I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd been walking blindfolded through my own life, and now the blindfold was off, and the view was nothing but ashes. I needed answers, and I knew where to start. I pulled out my laptop and started digging. Social media, emails, bank statements, every breadcrumb I could find. At first, there was nothing obvious. Jess was careful, but careful people always slip up eventually. And then I found it, an unfamiliar hotel charge on our joint credit card. Dated 2 months ago. The name of the hotel? The Ashford. I leaned back in my chair, heart pounding. The Ashford wasn't just any hotel. It was the hotel. The kind of place where people didn't go for a quiet weekend getaway. They went there to disappear. I grabbed my phone and dialed the hotel. "Thank you for calling the Ashford. How can I help you?" Cleared my throat. "Hi. I'm trying to confirm a reservation under Jessica Morgan." There was a brief pause as the receptionist checked. "Yes, Ms. Morgan stayed with us. Would you like me to pull up the details?" "Yes," I said quickly, my pulse racing. 2-night stay, the receptionist said. "Checked in on October 14th. Room booked for 2 guests. 2 guests. My stomach turned. "And the name of the second guest?" I asked, holding my breath. "I'm sorry, sir. I can't give out that information." Of course. Privacy policies. I clenched my fist, trying to stay calm. "Can you at least confirm if it was the same person for both nights?" "Yes, it was." I hung up, my mind racing. 2 nights. 2 people. Someone who wasn't Mark. How many men were there? The next morning, I decided I wasn't going to wait for Jessica to come clean. If she wasn't going to tell me the truth, I'd dig it out myself. I found her in the kitchen, casually sipping coffee like we hadn't just had the most explosive argument of our lives. She looked up when I walked in, her expression unreadable. "You're still here," she said, a hint of amusement in her voice. "Of course I'm here," I said. "This is my house." She smirked. "Is it? For how much longer?" I ignored the jab. "We need to talk." "I think we've done enough of that," she said, taking another sip of coffee. "No, we haven't," I said firmly. "You're going to tell me everything. Right now. Every name. Every lie. Every time you walked out that door and left me wondering where you were." Jessica set her cup down, crossing her arms. "Why? What's the point? You already know it's over." "The point is, I deserve the truth," I said. "After everything I've done for you, after everything we've been through, I deserve at least that." Her eyes narrowed. "You want the truth, Dylan? Fine." She leaned forward, her voice low and venomous. "I was bored. That's the truth. You want to know why I did it? Because I could. Because every time you stayed late at work, every time you ignored me to check your emails, I realized how easy it would be to slip away. And guess what? It was. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. So, this was about me working too much?" She rolled her eyes. "Don't be naive. This wasn't about you. It was about me. I wanted excitement. I wanted attention. And guess what? I got it." I clenched my fists, trying to keep my temper in check. "And what about Mark? And the guy at the Ashford?" Jessica's eyes flickered with surprise. "You found that, huh?" "Yeah, I found it," I said, my voice ice cold. "And I'll keep finding more. So go ahead. Tell me how many there were." She stared at me for a long moment, then smiled. "Enough." "Enough for what?" "Enough to know that I don't regret it," she said, her voice cruel. "You think this is about one mistake, Dylan? This is who I am. I've been living in a cage for years, and I finally broke out." Her words cut deeper than any knife ever could. "You're a monster," I whispered. Jessica tilted her head, as if considering the label. "Maybe. Or maybe I'm just tired of pretending to be the perfect little wife." I shook my head, backing away. "I loved you." "I know," she said softly. "That's what made it so easy." I turned and walked out, slamming the door behind me. I wasn't going to break, but I was done playing the fool. I drove aimlessly for hours. The same streets I'd driven 100 times before felt foreign now, like I was seeing them through a cracked lens. Everything felt wrong, twisted. I couldn't stop hearing her words. "This wasn't about you. It was about me. I don't regret it. This is who I am." I gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. Jessica wasn't just cheating. She was enjoying it. She wasn't sorry. She wasn't ashamed. She was proud of what she'd done, like it was some badge of freedom. I parked on a quiet street, leaned back in my seat, and closed my eyes. I needed to think, to plan my next move. Because one thing was crystal clear now. I wasn't dealing with the woman I thought I knew. I was dealing with a predator. When I finally got home, the house was quiet. Too quiet. Jessica's car was still in the driveway, but she wasn't in the kitchen or the living room. For a moment, I thought she might have packed her things and left. But then I heard her voice upstairs, talking to someone. My pulse quickened as I crept up the stairs, careful to avoid the creaky step. Her bedroom door was slightly ajar, and I could see her sitting on the edge of the bed, phone pressed to her ear. I stopped outside the door, listening. "I told you it's done," she was saying. Her tone was calm but firm, like she was the one calling the shots. "I'm not dealing with his paranoia anymore." There was a pause as the person on the other end spoke. "No, you don't need to come here," she said quickly. "It'll just make things worse." I pushed the door open. Jessica jumped, nearly dropping her phone. "Dylan, who's that?" I asked, my voice steady. Too steady. She scrambled to end the call, shoving the phone into her pocket. "It's no one." I took a step closer. "No one, huh? Funny. Because you seemed pretty worried about no one showing up here." Jessica stood up, crossing her arms like she was trying to regain control. "I don't have to explain myself to you." "Yes, you do," I said, my voice sharp. "You don't get to lie to my face and then play the victim. You've been lying for months, probably years. And I want the truth. All of it." She sighed, like she was tired of this game. Dylan, you're wasting your time. I've already told you. It's over. I shook my head. No, it's not over. Not until I say it's over. Jessica's eyes narrowed. You're not going to scare me, Dylan. You think storming in here and demanding answers will change anything? It won't. I've moved on. Moved on to who? I asked, stepping closer. Mark? Or is it someone else now? Because let's be honest, Jess. You're not exactly picky, are you? That hit a nerve. Her face twisted in anger. Don't you dare talk to me like that. Why not? I shot back. You've treated me like garbage for months. Lied to me. Humiliated me. And now you think you can just walk away like none of it matters. Jessica took a step closer, her voice low and venomous. You want to know why I did it? Because I was bored, Dylan. Bored of you. Bored of this life. You're predictable. Safe. And I needed more. Her words hit me like a slap, but I didn't flinch. So, you ruined everything for a thrill? She smiled coldly. Pretty much. I stared at her, feeling a strange calm wash over me. The woman standing in front of me wasn't my wife. She was a stranger wearing Jessica's face. Do you even feel anything? I asked quietly. Jessica tilted her head, pretending to think. Not really. Silence hung between us. Then I nodded slowly. Okay. Jessica frowned. Okay. Yeah. I said, turning to leave. You're right. I am predictable. But not anymore. As I walked out the door, I could feel her eyes on my back, because she knew this wasn't over. Not even close. The next morning, I wasn't the same man. I'd been quiet for too long. I'd let her lie, manipulate, and walk all over me. But now it was my turn. Jessica thought she was the one in control. She thought I'd just roll over, accept her betrayal, and let her walk out unscathed. But she didn't realize something. I don't lose. Not like this. Not to her. I started making calls. First, to a private investigator I knew through a friend. I need you to dig up everything on Jessica Morgan, I said. I want to know who she's been with, where she's been, and what she's hiding. Next, I called our bank. Freeze the joint accounts, I instructed. No transactions without my authorization. Then I called her best friend, Lana. Lana had always been a little too loyal to Jessica, but I'd seen cracks in their friendship lately. Cracks I was about to pry wide open. When Lana picked up, her tone was guarded. Dylan? Why are you calling me? Because you know what she's been doing, I said bluntly. And I think you've had enough of covering for her. There was a long pause. What do you want? I want names, dates, everything. Lana sighed heavily. She's going to kill me for this. No, she won't, I said calmly. Because after I'm done, she won't have any power left to hurt anyone. Lana gave me more than I expected. There wasn't just Mark. There was Evan, Chris, Paul. Some were one-night hookups. Others had been around for months. The worst part? One of them was a guy I knew, Chris. He was a regular at the bar I used to go to after work. We'd even had drinks together once or twice. The betrayal hit me like a sledgehammer, but it also fueled me. Jessica wasn't going to get away with this. Not after everything. That evening, I waited for her to come home. When she walked through the door, she froze. I was sitting at the dining table, her phone in front of me, along with printed copies of her call logs, hotel reservations, and text messages I'd had pulled from her cloud account. Sit down, I said, my voice calm. Jessica's eyes darted to the papers. For the first time, I saw real panic in her expression. What is this? Evidence, I said, of every single lie you've told me, every man you've been with, every hotel you've snuck off to. She swallowed hard but tried to play it off. Dylan, this is insane. You've gone too far. Too far, I snapped, standing up. You think I've gone too far? You've been sleeping with half the city while I've been breaking my back to keep this marriage afloat. And now you're going to sit there and listen to every name, every lie, every betrayal. I picked up the first paper and started reading. Mark, Chris, Paul, Evan. Jessica's face went pale. Stop. No, I said, my voice cutting through her protest. You don't get to tell me to stop. You don't get to control this anymore. I'm done playing the fool. She stood up, knocking over her chair. Do you think humiliating me is going to fix anything? You think this makes you better than me? No, I said, stepping closer. But it makes me free. Free from you. Free from your lies. And when I'm done, you'll be the one who's humiliated. Jessica's eyes burned with fury. You're not the victim here, Dylan. Don't pretend you're innocent. I laughed bitterly. Oh, I'm far from innocent. But the difference is I didn't destroy our marriage. You did. She took a step closer, her voice low and venomous. And what are you going to do now? Ruin my life? Is that your big plan? I smiled. No, Jess. You ruined your own life. I'm just making sure everyone sees it. For the first time, I saw fear in her eyes, and it felt damn good. Before she could say another word, I grabbed my coat and walked to the door. Where are you going? She called after me. I paused, turning to look at her one last time, to make sure everyone knows exactly who you are. Then I walked out, and this time, I wasn't coming back. I walked out the front door, slamming it behind me, and took a deep breath of cold night air. Felt different, final, like a door had closed, not just on my house, but on us. Jessica thought she had me figured out. She believed I was predictable, a man who would stew in his own misery while she moved on, untouchable. But that's the thing about people like her, they don't expect consequences. I wasn't going to let her slip away quietly. I went straight to Chris. He worked at a gym downtown. I knew his schedule, knew exactly when he'd be closing up for the night. When he saw me standing by his car in the parking lot, he froze. Dylan. His voice was wary, like he knew why I was there. I didn't give him time to speak. You slept with my wife. Chris shifted uncomfortably, rubbing the back of his neck. Look, man. Don't look, man, me. I snapped, stepping closer. You knew who I was. You shook my hand. We had drinks. And the whole time, you were sneaking around with Jessica. Chris looked down, guilt etched across his face. I didn't know it was like that. She told me you two were done. She's been telling that same story to everyone. I said, my voice cold. You're not special. He flinched at that. Good. But here's the thing, Chris. I continued. You're not my real problem. She is. And now, I'm going to make sure her lies catch up with her. Chris frowned. What do you mean? You'll see soon enough. I turned and walked away, leaving him standing there, looking like he'd seen a ghost. The next morning, I put my plan in motion. Step 1, the email. I compiled every piece of evidence I had, screenshots of her messages, hotel receipts, photos from the investigator. I wrote a carefully crafted message and sent it to everyone. Her friends, her coworkers, her family. Subject line, the truth about Jessica. There was no anger in the email. No insults. Just facts. Cold, hard facts that couldn't be denied. I laid it all out, piece by piece, until there was no room left for doubt. And then I hit send. Step 2, the meeting. Jessica's job was her pride and joy. She worked as a marketing director at a firm that valued image above all else. So, I made sure the firm's CEO got a copy of the email too. An hour later, I got a call from Lana. Dylan, what did you do? She asked, her voice trembling. I told the truth, I said simply. Jessica's losing it, Lana said. She's already had 3 calls from the office. They're talking about putting her on leave. Good. Dylan, this is serious, Lana continued. She's going to come after you. I'm counting on it, I said. It didn't take long. Jessica showed up at my office later that afternoon. She stormed past the receptionist, her heels clicking furiously against the floor. When she burst into my office, she looked like a woman on the edge, wild-eyed, furious, and desperate. You think you're smart, don't you? She hissed, slamming the door behind her. I leaned back in my chair, calm as ever. I think I'm done being your fool. You ruined my life, she shouted. No, I said. You ruined your life. I just handed you the mirror. She paced the room like a caged animal, her hands trembling. Do you know what you've done? My job, my friends, my family. They're all turning on me. And they should, I said. They deserve to know who you really are. Jessica stopped pacing and glared at me, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. You think you've won? I stood up, stepping around my desk until we were face to face. I don't need to win, Jess. I just needed to stop losing. She stared at me, her jaw clenched, her eyes burning with hatred. But behind the anger, I saw something else. Fear. And that's when I knew I'd taken back control. You can go now, I said, opening the door for her. We're done here. Jessica stood there for a moment, like she wanted to say something. But in the end, she just grabbed her bag and walked out, slamming the door behind her. The divorce papers were filed the next day. I made sure everything was airtight. No loopholes. No leverage for her to twist. Jessica wouldn't get a penny more than she deserved. And frankly, she deserved nothing. 1 week later, I was sitting in my new apartment when I got a message from Lana. It was a screenshot of Jessica's latest social media post. A picture of her, alone with a caption that read, "Some lessons are learned the hard way." I stared at it for a long time, and then I deleted the message, because I was done looking back. Final thoughts. Sometimes the people closest to you are the ones who hurt you the most. But betrayal doesn't have to break you. It can set you free if you let it. Jessica thought she could destroy me. She thought I'd crumble. But in the end, I walked away stronger. And she's the one who has to live with what she's done.